So we're going to talk about behavior-driven development today, often truncated down to BDD. Curious, by show of hands, can I see how many people are developers? Okay, roughly 60%. How many people are managers, project managers, or interact with the developers? Okay, a couple. Perfect. That's okay. Though development is in the word here, we're going to mostly be talking about people and how that relates to behavior-driven development. Behavior-driven development attempts to solve people problems in the development workflow. So there exists this friction between people when working on projects. It's this us versus them mentality. Despite everyone going in and wanting to work with each other and having the best intention, there does exist this underlying friction of, do you have my best intentions at heart? Are we on the same team? Are you an outside vendor? Can I really trust you? Really, it centers around the theory of trust. Are we aiming for the same goals, and are we trying to accomplish the same thing? Behavior-driven development brings this friction to the surface and attempts to alleviate it. So when we talk about friction, us versus them, us can be a wide range of things. We can have, for us can be a large-scale organization with internal teams. These can be a large federal government agency with smaller departments. This could be a university with smaller schools. Each school has their internal department that perhaps have different teams and trying to work with each other and match the overall vision of the university. I think this is maybe the most common form of people that I talk to here, the digital consulting firm, an outside agency that's brought in as expertise to help a client solve a particular business problem where maybe they don't have the internal resources or the internal expertise. Or even a product team where you are attached directly to one software project and that is your full-time occupation, and you are part of the company, part of the team that maintains and owns that product. The client, the them factor in this us versus them friction. The client are the direct faces of your end users. These are the people interacting with your site, what they do with your site, how they use your site. All of the clients across all of the examples that we interact with large agencies all the way down to product team, all have some similar traits. They know that technology is a magical unicorn, right? Anything that they want, it can accomplish. It's as simple as just putting a button on a page. It's not that hard. Just do what I need it to do, not what I'm asking it to do. The client doesn't really empathize with some of the internal development terms. They don't understand blockers. They don't understand why we keep wanting to do stand-ups. They want the product to work. They want it to behave how they're expecting it to, and they want to reach their desired results. There's a third player in this, and that is management or stakeholders. These are the people that usually facilitate the conversations and try to match and understand the business needs of the company, match it up with their client, the end user, and communicate that down to the dev team. They're usually responsible for delivering the goods, which also means they're responsible for dealing with issues when they arise with the goods not being delivered, something being over budget, or something being wildly out of scope, or requirements that maybe weren't nailed down as they should have been. If things keep going wrong, or things are amiss, or they're not maybe where their expectations are supposed to be, the stakeholders are usually the ones dealing with that. Usually when things go awry, or they don't go as expected, or fall a little behind, even if they're successful projects, there's a lot of time retrospective where we look, how can we improve this process? How can we improve what we delivered? How can we increase quality? Usually the solution here is if we come at it with a better plan, if we plan around it better, if we understand exactly what it is we want and ask for that and find the features that are going to be used, we'll have a better product we can deliver to our clients. Another component that plays into this friction really is sometimes in dealing with clients, they come to the table with poor expectations. Sometimes developers come to the table with poor expectations as well. Poor expectations and not leveling those out at the beginning can lead to some conflict or lost dev time through the development cycle. So sometimes the clients will come in just with the preconception that this is going to come in over budget. This is going to go down. We're going to have problems. We're going to have deployment problems. They have these preconceived conceptions sometimes from dealing with past vendors or through other experiences. We're not going to come in time. We're not going to come in under budget. It won't work as expected in production. We've had a lot of clients come in with these preconceptions from dealing with past vendors. It's important for us to recognize these and bring them to the table at the front so we can make sure that we're addressing them. Developers also come in with their own preconceptions. Sometimes we assume we're working on a project, strategies talk to them, it's been sold, we're just going to get perfect spec'd out requirements and we can go off there and build. We're going to build to whatever the tickets say or whatever the spec sheet says. Not often the case, and not often the best for the client, to just build off a spec sheet with no context of what the user wants. So how this plays out with the communication in the development cycle, and I think this is typical in most agencies or most teams I've talked to. Sometimes this is one person. Sometimes this is multiple person for each slide. But there's this ladder that happens through the development process. Even in Agile, even in Waterfall, it's kind of similar. A project will start in the planning phase. We'll have initial sales kickoff. We'll understand what you're trying to do, what your scope is, what the requirements are. Then we'll kick it off to strategy, and we'll kind of start to strategize around how we're going to help you accomplish those goals. Strategy will come up with a direction to take. Sometimes these steps can be combined, but then strategy will kick it off to design. Design will go through, and this is where you start getting mock-ups, wireframes, static images, assets, and we start trying to articulate how we're going to implement those to the client, and design kicks it off to development. This is where I wanted to illustrate a common occurrence that happens further down the pipeline where we haven't maybe had the best requirements laid out in front of us of great. The user wants to, it's an e-commerce site, and the user wants to check out. And design is giving us a cart checkout button with a big green button that says calculate price. And it hits development implements it, and development goes, I've got experience with this. How are you guys calculating tax based on where the user is? Design goes, I don't know. They just said they wanted to calculate price. Goes back to strategy. Strategy says, we never talked about it with the client. We have no idea. And you end up having to kick this all the way back down to a planning stage. And you have to go through all of these people, if you're a single shop, you have to put all these hats on back yourself, go back to the client, resolve these communications, all because we didn't have the best requirements. So the further you get through this process, and after development, there's testing, the further along you get in this process where you started realizing and identifying that what you have built doesn't fully accomplish what your end user is trying to, or what they expect to, or what your stakeholders want them to, the further back up the ladder you have to climb, and then, again, climb back all the way down it. So I like this graph, and it really illustrates the cost behind all this. Cost can be thought of in dollar amounts. Cost can be thought of in time. The further we get along in the development cycle and the development process, the more expensive catching a bug or catching something we implemented that doesn't meet expectations is going to cost. If we have to kick something all the way back down to strategy, then it has to go back through the entire pipeline again, which means we need to get design in, we need to get theming in, we need to get development in, and then we can push it back to QA. Sometimes it has to go all the way back down, but the further in the cycle that it's caught, the more expensive it's going to be. Additionally, which isn't really captured here, something I like to talk about with bugs, is this is the result of catching a bug and having to go back to identify and squish that singular bug. It's also important to keep in mind, if you've built a system that is buggy, a core system that doesn't meet your user specifications, and it's gone too long unnoticed, you could then build additional systems on top of that. And not only do you have to replace your buggy systems, you may have to go back and update interfaces or update implementations of other systems that are relying on this, thus making the process even more costly. So this is, I think this is important to keep in mind. This is going to cost us development time. This is going to cost us QA time at some point down the road. On extended projects, that could be you end up spending an entire sprint or an entire session, like entire couple weeks period, just on squishing bugs that were introduced because you didn't have good requirements at the start of strategy. So by having to spend that time, which you should QA, you should by no means give up QA, but having to go back and deal with bugs that were introduced through regression and bad requirements is going to mean you're not spending as much time delivering features that the client wants. That's less value you're sending to your clients and you're delivering to your stakeholders. So these are some common challenges that are introduced in the us-them or clients and dev interactions that result in that costly bug graph. The client can't really communicate desired outcome. The client will say things. I've had a client requirement come in to make a landing page sparkle and dazzle. I don't know how to implement that. I think Craigslist sparkles and dazzles. I think it's personally functional. That may not accomplish your user desires. So it's important to make sure that there's communication there when the client asks for things. When they ask you for a feature, when they ask you to implement something, make sure that you understand why. If you don't, ask them why. What value is this giving their end users? If it's an e-commerce site, what is this adding to their customers? If this is a nonprofit site, what is this adding to your visitors? Are you trying to inform? Are you trying to educate? How is this helping you accomplish your business goals? What value is this giving to them? Always keep that in mind and make sure that you're building all of your technical specs around that. So the developers also need to understand what needs to be built. Sometimes we like to pigeonhole our vision and only focus on technical implementations. I don't care about the context. I've got this awesome technical requirement that I need to build this insane entity relation map between all of these different moving parts. And it would be really fun if we did it with this technology, and we get so bogged down in implementation, we sometimes don't understand what actually needs to get built, or we will take the implementation further than it needs. There's always an MVP point on a requirement, and there's also always a point on a requirement where it's done to the client. You can stop. You don't need to keep working. You don't need to add bells and whistles because it's accomplishing the client's business needs. The client doesn't, and the inverse of that, the client doesn't really understand technical requirements as much. So that's why oftentimes they're communicating or working with you in the first place. They're not as interested in as the entity relation diagram or the field mappings or things of that nature. They're more interested in the value derived from the behaviors and the interactions they're having on the website. So, thinking back to this graph, all of this can be avoided by identifying the value that your end users are trying to derive. If you're going to spend less time having to squash regression bugs, you're going to get to spend more time delivering to the client. You're going to spend more time delivering them value. You're going to have faster development by going through this process. You're going to spend more time implementing features. You're going to spend more time delivering things the client and the end user actually needs. So how do we accomplish all this? It's a vast problem set, and it's a common one I've experienced across Agile, Waterflow, and several other workflows. This is where behavior-driven development can help you. Behavior-driven development is, we'll throw the proper definition up there, but it's really all about just defining the value that people, the humans that interact with your site, that they're deriving out of it, and understanding what that is. We're defining the behaviors of the users of your site. It describes the interactions they're going to have, how they're going to get from point A to point B, and keeping in mind the context and going through their perspective. So some perks of BDD, there's a learning curve, it is a process, but the perks are definitely worth it. What are they? We create this common domain language between us and the client. We learn how to communicate together on the same plane. We're not losing things. Every client they own their business, they own their product, whatever it may be. They understand their domain knowledge. I don't understand pipe fittings or maybe the intricacies of fantasy football league management. They do. I don't. I understand my technical field. They don't. So it's about creating this clear communication where we're speaking the same language and we understand that we're communicating effectively between our domain languages. We do this by creating this shared language, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a slide coming up. But it also captures the intent of the requirements, not not just and there's a button that calculates tax. Understands that we're capturing taxes, so we're staying compliant across multiple regions. So we can, if we have the intent in mind, we can understand that, well, your site's in multiple regions. We're in the US and the EU. Are we capturing tax for both of those separate situations? It's about capturing the intent of the value that we're trying to provide to our end users. And it's about understanding more of the actual business needs. There's an interesting study of features built up front and features actually used and implemented on a site. I think it's usually about 15% of the features you build capture 90% of the user interaction of the user interface. And on average, I think the last few years they've done a study, it's somewhere around 45% of the features you implement remain largely untouched. This is across multiple software projects, all the way from small up to the highest enterprise. So it's important to keep in mind that we're matching what we're trying to implement as close as we can to business requirements, so we're building things that users are getting value out of. And we're tracking that. So it's all about the behaviors. It's all about capturing the intent of users and what they're doing. So when I say behaviors, it's really just a fancy way of saying testing. So why are we looking at behaviors in the first place? Well, that's because we're building things with technology, we're building software. Technology is a great enabler, right? We can do anything with software. No, that's not true. Technology is great for us digging a hole and getting ourselves stuck. It gives us the possibility to do endless things, and without directions, we can end up going down a very incorrect path. Technology should support the human behaviors. I think, if anything, that's what you should take away from understanding BDD or behavior-driven development, that the things we build should, at the forefront, be supporting human interactions. We should always keep that in mind and always strive to accomplish that. So how do we accomplish this functionally? How do we do this? There are some tools around this. They're primarily, the biggest one we use in the Drupal space is Behat. It's a testing framework that is used to do behavior-driven testing or behavior testing, also known as system testing. There is a unit testing framework called PHP Spec that ties similarly into this test first, build a spec, test off the spec. That's outside of the scope of here, though. So we want to do Behat in Drupal. Because it's in Drupal and we want to do a thing, there's a module for that. Of course there is. Well, it's not really a module, it's a library. It's called the Drupal extension, which is now actually two libraries, but they depend on each other. So this piggybacks on the Behat project and runs off of the Mink browser emulator. And this adds in a ton of very generic Drupal testing that we can add to this to capture behaviors. Things specific to Drupal, like, and I clear the cache, and I'm on the home page, and I log in. Some Drupalisms that aren't very generic to the web. So briefly we'll cover this. As far as adding to this to your project, it's really simple. You don't even need both of those. You can add a single line to your composer, run update, it'll pull in, you'll grab the Drupal extension, you'll grab the Drupal driver, you'll grab Behat, and all of the dependencies, and you're good to go. You need to throw in a Behat configuration YAML file. That is the bare bones minimum. You have a lot of power and a lot of utility in configuring what you can do and what you can't do. I'm not going to cover that because by the time I did, it would probably be updated and changed. Use your Google powers for that. I believe in you. So as far as writing tests, this better in Drupal 8 because we're using features a lot less, or hopefully we're using features a lot less. There's a bit of a naming conflict, and Behat and behavior-driven development, we call our test features. Why is that? Because we're describing features on our site, features that our users interact with. So this is just a typical file structure on a project that I've included Behat on. You'll have a directory it's looking for. It typically will look for your tests in a features directory. All of your feature tests will end with the .feature nomenclature. And if there's anything you want to write or add or extend, there is a class that you can extend and add features that don't ship out of the box, which you very probably will have to do. So how do we write tests with this idea of user requirements and behaviors and understanding user interactions? Well, we take the client requirement. The client may say, I want to be able to log into my website so I can edit content, or I want to be able to edit and update my content. Okay, well, we're in Drupal, so huzzah. We're already built to do that out of the box. But let's walk through this step and how we would take this client requirement and break this down into a test, and how we would build this common language around this. Behat supports, it's written off of a project called Cucumber and Ruby, and it creates this common language to describe interaction on the site that use this format given, when, then. Given some context is true, some situation, when an interaction happens, then an expected result should show up. So I could break this down, and I would break this down, and this is breaking this down into more user stories, so I understand what the client's intent is, and I'm capturing their interaction. This follows a similar word structure, but I've seen people get locked into this, so I don't really subscribe to this. You need to write all of your requirements as a user, I want an action so that. I find that if you tell people that, they will end up writing everything in this format without thinking it through. You don't need to stick with that. You just need to understand what portion of your audience is this for, who's it describing, what they're trying to do, and what the value given to them is. So in this case, I would say, as an anonymous user, I want to be able to log into my website so that I can edit my content. So this is described. I can go to my website. Obviously, I'm not logged in all the way. We're not doing some kind of OAuth or VPN whitelisting to give you edit access. I can go to my website as an anonymous user. I can log in, and I can edit my content. There's no implementation details there. There's nothing about Drupal's login page, edit forms, username and password. This is very client-friendly. This is very much a shared language we have between us and the client. So the acceptance criteria for this, which this is where we get into the given, when, thens, I would describe this as, given I'm an anonymous user, and I'm at the login page, or admin login, and I fill this specific field with a name, and I fill a field with the name of pass with these credentials, I will then be able to log in. This presupposes I have a user with admin and admin, but for this case I do. And I press what happens when I enter those fields? I press this button, and at that point I expect to be logged in, and I should see a link that says log out. So I'm a little excited. This is actually in Drupal 7 how we confirmed with simpletest that you were logged in. We would hit the user variable. We would just effectively look for a logout link. If you're logged in, it goes to reason there should be a logout link somewhere. This also kind of gives the impression that if you're logged in, you should also have the ability to log back out, which is a nice little capture of a feature. So we've written some acceptance criteria about logging in. How would it look to edit my website? Because that's what I want to do. I don't want to just log in. I want to be able to edit my website. So here I would describe the context, given I'm logged in as a user and I'm an administrator. When I go to node add page, I can add new content. I confirm that by saying, if I'm on the page to add a new node, I should see create a basic page. I should also get an HTTP 200 response, meaning I'm allowed to be on that page. I didn't get an error. I didn't get an access denied. I didn't get a page not found. So I got a valid response, and I'm seeing the text that I expect to see on that page. So what does this look like? This is all human readable language. These are all things we would show to the client. These are things we put in a ticket or a teamwork task or a Trello card of, this is what you asked for. This is how I understood. This is what I'm going to build, okay? This actually, if you put it in this format, all I did with this was put it in a flat file. It's called user-login.feature, and it's more of an implementation thing, but I tagged it with this @API tag, which is going to use our Drupal library to run this. This is an executable test as is. This will execute in the browser, or this will execute in the command line. And we can use this to authenticate when we deliver this feature, even though this is Drupal out of the box, that this is indeed what we're building and that it works how we intended. It also means that if we have this test, everything we roll out in the future will make sure that this is never reverted or even ever regressed back. So a brief, just a screenshot of what it looks like to execute this test. I would have, when you install Behat, you have a binary, same as Composer. You can add it to your global path if you want, but we keep ours in, for each project, we use different versions of Behat. But when I run this is the test as it executes. This is what you get spit back out. It tells me how many scenarios that I've tested, tells me how many steps those scenarios describe, and also gives me this gorgeous green text, meaning everything is good to go. the opposite of our recording software. Green means good. Green means you're ready to go. Red means you failed, you need to go back and re-implement and make sure your tests are passing before you can pass this. Cannot pass go until all of your tests are green. So it's important, going back to user requirements, it's important that, again, we're being really clear on our goals. We're being really clear on what the value we're trying to add to our users are. Whether it's a stakeholder or it's an end user or it's a we need to make sure that we understand who the users, who the audience of the site, what they're trying to accomplish, what the goal and visions of the project are trying to do. So we talk about goals a lot, and these are very high-level goals, maybe not something specifically implemented. But this is an example of a bad goal. I've gotten this once before. I have products on my site. I don't have an e-commerce site, but I have a product catalog. I want to make money. I want to make more money. Okay, cool. Can you elaborate more? No. I want to make more money. Okay, cool. I'm going to hand that task off to my developer and let him decide you want to make more money. Cool. We threw a ton of ads on your site. You're an e-commerce site, but this accomplishes your goal, right? You said you wanted to make more money. This did it. By the requirements, we're done here. This is a horrible experience. Please don't do this. So, a good goal. What is a good goal? It's not I won or anything like that. Goals are measurable. They have a time box, and they have to be practically accomplishable. You can't. We can't have moonshots of goals that I want to make all of the money, or I want to make a Peter Jackson-sized mountain of money selling Lord of the Rings merchandise. So taking that goal and keeping that in mind to rework it, a good goal would be, I want to increase revenues 12% over the next 12 months through an e-commerce store. I want to add e-commerce to my site. I want to increase my overall revenue. This is excellent. This gives us measurable results. It gives us a time box to measure success or failure against of, and gives us a direction of how you intend to accomplish this goal. We can work with this. If you went to Matt Glomman's talk earlier, you could do this through analytics, reporting, and figuring out how your users are getting through your site, how to funnel them into a shopping cart, how to decrease turnover rate, and how to increase driving them to the shopping cart and getting them to complete the checkout process. So it's good to get goals out of your requirement and have goals you can match up the requirements and features you're building against the goals. They're very specific, they're measurable, and they're time-bound, meaning we can see what's being accomplished. Everything. Clients aren't always going to do this for you, it seems counterintuitive. This is what they're trying to do. They should understand this. Sometimes they need to be pressed. We need to make sure they're aware of it and press them a little bit to keep this in mind. We want to make sure that the person asking us to implement a feature is actually making sure this matches up to the business goal. Sometimes, especially with large organizations or clients, or somebody will be asking for a requirement that hasn't ran it through their stakeholders, doesn't make sure that it matches up. Maybe one of their editors is sending you requirements that creates this insane editorial workflow that takes a year and a half to get content published on their website because they think it's a good idea, but they've never talked about it. Does it match up to the overall business goal to make client editable quick and publishable quick and easy? So it's always good to match all your requirements up with your goals. So when we have goals and we have behaviors on how we're going to drive users to accomplish those goals, it's good to explain those with examples. That's the idea behind behavior-driven development. We're not talking about technical implementation. We're talking about how users interact with your site, and we do that through examples. When I logged in earlier as an admin, it was an example of me logging in as the admin user. So let's imagine we have an e-commerce shop, and I get this feature request. We need to add sales tax and delivery cost on checkout. Okay, we can do that. That makes total sense. The client gives us a raw spec. There's some numbers that we throw in. There's a delivery cost. So they give us this as a spec. I have a delivery cost on small orders. Anything under $20 has a delivery cost of $3. Anything over $20 has a delivery cost of $2. Awesome. I can take those are both measurable and accomplishable, and I can turn those into a test requirement, acceptance criteria that translates into a Behat test. I would do this with examples. Once I started planning this out, I would go, okay, well, first, if I'm checking out, is there sales tax? Is there a delivery fee? And as I'm writing this out, I realized as I was doing this, there's no example or information about what happens to orders that are exactly $20. Had I built this to spec, this was a bug in previous implementations, we would have delivered a feature that effectively means if you have a checkout cart of exactly $20, you pay no tax and you get free delivery. Doesn't match the client's goals. So we need to make sure with examples we eliminate ambiguity. Ambiguity will lead to undiscovered bugs or misunderstandings in what we're implementing from requirements. So this would be a better set of acceptance criteria I could deliver back to the client and say, okay, this is how I understand what you're asking for. This is what the site's going to do. Can you confirm? Given a price is priced at $15, meaning it's under 20, and I add it to the order, then the total should be $21. So I'm also, in here, I'm including the tax structure we would have with what they want to get taxed off of, which I think we're doing at a 10% rate because it's easier. It's also calculating whether we calculate tax prior to adding on the delivery cost or after. But we push these finite numbers back to the client as examples to get their sign off. And again, thinking back to the development ladder, this happens very early on in communication of the strategy of implementing this feature. I haven't done dev, I haven't sent it to QA, I haven't burnt any time on this. I haven't wasted time spinning up. We're confirming what we're building before we start building. The beautiful thing is, this is part of a conversation with the client. Once we have this, we instantly turn it into a test with using our Behat magic words, or behavior-driven development magic words. Given some context, when some action happens, then a result happens. Okay, so yes, I'm going to attempt to do a demo of just how this would work in practice. So I have here the greatest site of all time, MindGrub.com, my local instance of it. I'm from MindGrub, by the way, plug. So I'm developing our website, and we have some basic business requirements we've turned into Behat test that we would run with our Behat binary. Let's see here. Perfect. So I will do fin Behat. Ignore fin. That's something completely unrelated. That is, I'm using a local Doxel instance. If you want to learn more about that, of zero configuration spin up, Will Jackson there is doing a talk on it tomorrow. Highly recommend it. Love the tool. But I'm just going to run the Behat binary against our Docker environment. Okay, so if I can make this a little bit bigger. Nope, fail. Okay, so I can see here I've got 3 tests that I've tried to run, and somewhere there's a mouse. All right, close enough. So I had a feature here. We had a failure. Okay, that's good. We caught something that was wrong with our site. We can't deploy. We need to fix this first. I had a feature for careers. As an honest user, when I visit the career page, got an error. What's wrong with this? I got a 404. Okay. So currently, one of our main driving focuses on our website is to allow people to apply for our job openings. Had I pushed this feature up, well, we would have broke that, and our HR department would be extremely upset with us. So some other tests we ran, made sure we can still access the homepage. That's good. And did some very generic stuff and things to make sure I can still log in as an admin user. Okay, that's good. We failed. Because Behat behavior-driven development is all about communication, transparency, and a shared language, it's nice because the client can see exactly what's going on in your development cycle. If we're going to share this information with them, we go, okay, we can't deploy right now because there's a bug. What's going on? Well, we can't find the careers page. We don't even need to articulate that. This information covers it perfectly. They can see, oh, okay, well, no one can apply for an open job right now because this is broken. We have that clear communication. We have a common language. And we've got an automated testing suite that tells them when things are working or aren't working. It also confirms that when we push new things up, everything we said is working is working. So a little nice to have that. Oh, okay, wrong. If I can find the tab. A little nice to have we find to communicate with the client. There's a plugin that at this point we've customized, but there's this nice plugin that generates this twig template of test results. Instead of giving them command line dump or somehow pegging that back into Jira, we present this with our clients at the end of every deliverable. which is a very clear and kind of beautified way of looking at the test results. They can look here and go, okay, well, we aren't passing everything. We're failing one. They can click into a little bit more to see what's going on. All generated automatically. So what I'll do now, typically this happens in a behavior-driven development workflow, I will clean my features up so that, all right, so I'm just going to clean my features up. I'm going to run them again. It's going to set up a thing. And, oh, perfect. I have all green. I can continue forward in development. I can continue forward this deployment. I can tell the client, you built what you want. It does what you want. It accomplishes your business goals. And we know that it does. We can confirm that we're done with this. And, oops, I'm not focused. Because it's all automated, we actually tie this into our CI process, so this gets generated on the fly, each pull request, each deployment. Because of this, we update our old twig tile, and we can kick this off to the client. It's awesome. We can tell them it's done. We get this beautiful little template that tells them we're done, gives them green lights across the board. What's the status of the project? It's greenlit. Just a quick review. How we go about BDD, if I can find my notes. We implement stories. We implement user stories. We write user stories that capture intent, business requirements, and matches up with goals. Those stories are made up of features that we implement to accomplish those goals. Each feature will enable capabilities or interactions, behaviors we want the end user to be able to accomplish on the site. Each of those features has to deliver an outcome. It has to deliver some value back to the end user. And then we stop. As soon as we deliver that value, we stop. We're not burning extra times. We didn't misunderstand your requirements, so we're not spending an extra week delivering something that you don't actually need. We hit the MVP, we hit exactly what you need, and then we stop development. And we confirm we're done through automated testing. This is a great benefit to the clients. It's almost an easy sell. Clients only are paying for features and development time for things that they actually need and capabilities they want. You stop and you ship. You'll be able to develop more, you'll be able to ship more often, and especially as a project's engagement goes on over a lengthy period of time, you'll have more confidence with deployments as your code base and complexity continues to grow. So if there are risks to BDD, if regular delivery and regular feedback is an issue or a risk that scares you, maybe this isn't for you. I think this is a benefit for most clients. You have measurable results to help mitigate against your risk. You can define through quantitatively how successful the project's going, how successful your future implementations are. And you know what done is. This is huge. You don't have those nagging requests or requirements that go on forever because you had really ambiguous requirements to start with that are never satisfiable, and you'll be working on this ticket until you die. You define what it is, it's measurable, and you know what the outcome is, so you can know when you're done. You've tested it, and you can confirm that it's done, and then it stays done as you continue to deploy. So that's it. That's it for me. I will put these slides up, but in the end, tests are good. Behavior-driven development's awesome. You should try it. I had some links in my slide if you're interested at all. All of my slides are posted through Git pages, so they're openly available. I've got a Vagrant install. It's Behat in the box if you were interested. It's a Drupal 7 install, but if you wanted to see, you can grab the repo. If you have Vagrant, which is not that heavy of a download, it spins up like that, and you can run Behat against Drupal 7 fresh install. I also have a separate presentation that talks a little bit more about the details of writing Behat tests in Drupal, writing custom test scenarios, custom steps, and extending some of the common libraries we use. That's it for me. Are there any questions?
How does UX fit in this?
It's all part of the conversation. In our development cycle, UX usually comes in after strategy when we've crafted what the requirements are. UX also should not be doing development or building any mockups until we have those requirements in place with the client, at least with the features that they're trying to build. If UX can't match up to what the behaviors of your end users are, then UX has failed right off the bat, and there's no point in implementing as a development cycle. UX, we don't use Behat as a tool for testing that UX matches our business requirements. We use some front-end testing frameworks to make sure that our UX implementations are good, and then also couple that with Behat to make sure that once the UX is implemented, you can drive a user through the software to get to the end result you were looking for. Yes?
Have you ever used Behat to do any type of browser